It's Monday. Right? And it's the 16th, the 17th?
16th.
16th.
17th.
17th.
Yeah.
So it's also so Shabbos is Yud so today's Yud Daled. Daled is Sivan. So we're here in this mimer that we already started yesterday. And it's about the Mekoshesh Eitzim, about the man who was gathering wood. And the word Eitzim, wood in Hebrew, also means trees. So he says this has to do with gathering the trees, the tree of life and the tree of knowledge. But we'll skip a little to where we are now. And what we ended with last time is the Zohar's words. Here, it's on page 84. So, you're in the right place. So it's 8 lines from the top. Ita bazoal, derei pulchana ke pulchana derechimuta. It says in the Zohar that there is no service like the service. At first, people read this out of love, meaning that you serve Hashem out of love. But the Alter Rebbe is medayek. He says, "Umidelo amar berechimuta, muvan hiyot ha'ava atzma b'chinat avoda v'amal gadol hagiya eleh." So the fact that he didn't say let pulchana ke pulchana berechimuta, that would mean serving out of love. So since it doesn't say that, rather it says the service of love, so that means that the toil, what a person needs to toil to reach, is the very love itself. Not even the service itself is to love. And the ability to love is itself a service. So what is this talking about? Obviously, like we know from the Tanya, and there's a number of different places. He says you don't love because of natural love. That one of the purposes of a Jew is to move from what we call natural love to love that's dictated by Hashem, by something higher. This is a very important point. Usually a person loves his children. Why does he love his children? Because it's nature. There's nature in it. But comes the Tanya and says, don't be like a non-Jew who loves his children because it's natural. Because that's like that's serving the animal soul. There's a big principle in Chassidus that we don't trust nature, which seems to be like to people. It's like, wow, what are you talking about? Everything today has to be natural, right? Not just outside of Yiddishkeit, but in Yiddishkeit itself. Like there's a famous Rav, I won't mention his name, so people don't say I'm saying something against him because I like him very much. I've learned from him a great deal. But he has a book called The Natural Chinuch. And apparently there's a natural way to do things. If you do things the natural way, then they're good. Why? Because we have this understanding that there's something very artificial about the world that we're in. So if you go backwards a little, it's called natural. But it's not really true. Because it used to be that nature itself was the problem. And nature itself has an inbred problem in it that prevents it from being trustworthy. And what's its problem? Not that it's not real, it's real. It says, Bereshit bara Elokim es hashamayim v'haaretz. Hashem created the heavens and the earth. Nature is here. Not only that, it's Hateva, the famous gematria that's from the 11th century, that Hateva, nature, equals Elokim, the name of Hashem with which He created the world. But what's the problem? That Elokim and nature, especially even more, conceal God's presence. So when you do things naturally, you're actually doing things without being cognizant, without being conscious of Hashem as the essence of all reality. And you've distanced yourself from Hashem, so you can act by nature, but you have to know that nature is a facade. Now it's not real, it's there, but as far as concealing God, again, it's hiding Him, it's concealing Him. So actually, when it comes to natural love, And the natural love of parents to children is one of the most natural things in the world. But even that, says the Tanya, you can't trust it. Meaning a person will make mistakes, tremendous mistakes, and not be able to introduce the consciousness of God into the relationship if he follows nature. So even when it comes to something like that, as natural as that, he says, don't love your children like the non-Jews who love them just because it's their nature, which is okay. It's okay for them. But you should love them because Hashem dictated that you should love. It's something completely different. What does it mean that Hashem dictated that? What happens if a mother doesn't love her child? There are such things. Especially when there's a postpartum depression and things like that, the mother can't take care of the children. She doesn't feel for them for whatever reason. So nonetheless, she still has a responsibility from Hashem to take care of them. So even if you can't love, or as we know, as children get older, they may do things that we're very unhappy with. And the natural love may be diminished to the point where it disappears. Because I'm so angry at you. I so can't... So I have to have something more than just nature guiding me. There has to be something more in my consciousness. So my dedication is first and foremost to the Master of the Universe. And in that sense, the love can never be extinguished. So it's a very important thing. And more, in other respects, there's also laws about if I have tzedakah, I have to feed my family, I have to feed somebody else. So there are laws. I can't overdo it with my family. Meaning I can't say we'll eat all the treasures in the world, and the next door neighbor is hungry. And even though I love my family more than I love my next door neighbor, what can I do? It's just natural to be that way. Okay, so there's a lot to be said about this. So when it comes to love, he says, so what does it mean to come to love? What does it mean that the service that I'm looking for is love itself? So he says, really, when you talk about love, you're not just talking about a natural affinity, but rather you have to uncover something, again, meditated, something in your mind that you didn't know about before. It's not a natural love, or at least it's not natural in the sense that it can go unthought about. Meaning, it's not just you can just let it happen by itself. It has to be something that you're conscious of.
So it's like seeing Hashem within your children.
It can, exactly. So here is exactly the same thing of seeing Hashem inside me. So what is this seeing Hashem without me? So he explains. Dehainu l'chsheitbonen. Sorry, I skipped a line. So, וכמו שמשה רבינו עליו השלום לימד דעת לאהבה את השם אלוקיך כי הוא חייך. Moshe Rabbeinu, what did he teach us? Why is he da'at? Why is he the general knowledge, the general consciousness of Am Yisrael? Because what he teaches us is to be conscious of the fact that Hashem is our life. Meaning, don't look for Hashem just out there as the one who commands in the sense of somebody who's transcendent, who's above. But also have to understand that Hashem is immanent. He's in you, He's with you. How, in what sense? Ki hu chayecha. He is your life. Ukmo, how when a person meditates, just thinks a little bit about how much he is dependent and loves his life force, the thing that gives me life. Usually we don't think about it. Exactly, it's natural. So, okay, it's a given that you live. When does a person realize that it's not such a big given? Unfortunately, only when things get really bad, physically or mentally.
When he has a bad landlord.
I don't know if that's exactly what.
When he feels like he's got a bad landlord.
If he's a bad landlord for his body, yeah. When the body begins to break down, if the person is suffering from a disease or anything like that, or has some kind of physical troubles, so then suddenly he feels, he understands that life force is not such a big, is not so easy to come by. Mm-hmm. That if you're a doctor, maybe you see it more, but about yourself, a person is close to himself, so he doesn't see it about himself. he doesn't see how precious his life force is until it doesn't work. Until it doesn't spread in the body properly. Until suddenly there's a part of my body that's not functioning the way it should.
It's actually a bad tenant.
Yeah, you're being a bad tenant in your
Bad tenant.
All the more so if it's like this in the body, all the more so when it's like that in the mind, in the heart. Meaning that when life force doesn't function properly in my mind and in my heart, so my mind can't learn Torah, and my heart can't feel the feelings that I want to feel. And what do I want to feel? I want to feel love and fear of Hashem. I want to connect to God. I want to connect to the infinite. I don't want. Somebody came by yesterday after we learned. He told me that he was just fired. But the thing he was really angry about wasn't that he was fired. He said is that the Balabait, the landlord, the guy who was his boss, he didn't know anything about him. There was never a connection, meaning he never sat down to learn about this guy, to see. It's just like work. It was very, very technical. And he did that, and it was over. And we've talked about it in the past, that without meditating on what it means to have a connection with Hashem, a person can take the Shulchan Aruch, and it becomes a menial labor. It's something that you have to do every day. Oh, you have to make the donuts again. Okay, we'll make the donuts again. 3 times a day you make the donuts. Make donuts or daven, same thing. What's the difference? They both become a menial task. So to prevent that, and so that the person doesn't depart the world feeling that there was no feeling involved, that there was not a personal relationship. Okay, I was here, I did my job, I was sent away, and that's it. He has to develop the heart. He has to develop the life force. If my life force is not filling my heart, then my feeling is one of menial labor, that life is just difficult. That's it. And there's no solace. There's nothing that makes it worthwhile.
David Melech said that only comes through brokenheartedness. That feeling of this ultimate feeling of clinging to Hashem.
That's why I said that most people only when you realize that the life force is not spreading properly, that they begin to understand that there's something missing. But even if you're living your life and there's no feeling of excitement, there's no feeling of gratitude, there's no feelings of astonishment, there's no feelings of wonder, so the heart's not getting its life force.
Question is, can you have those feelings without first bottoming out?
I don't know. So most people certainly can't. And suddenly they realize something is missing. When you're a child, it sort of just happens by itself. It's natural. But that's one of the things we see about nature, that because it's natural, it can't work for somebody who is already an adult, who is developed. It can carry you only so far. Nature can only take you so far. And in the end, because it conceals, it actually does you a disservice. At some point, you have to wake up and understand that your feelings are not free. I mean, we're very. I mean, look at the picture that Hollywood sells all the time, is that love is some kind of thing that just happens. And this is not true. It's simply not true. I mean, that's exactly the natural type of love, which we're not against, but it can't carry you. It certainly can't carry people through 50, 60 years of marriage. Is that okay? It happened. It was very nice that it happened.
Nice.
Yeah, a couple of years is very good. Usually it's a few months. And life takes over. And at some point you have to realize that the type of love that comes naturally easily leaves. Naturally leaves also. So you can't build it on those things. If you want to build something permanent and not make it into menial labor that you just hate, you have to learn how to awaken the heart. And to awaken the heart, that's the purpose of Chabad Chassidus, which says the purpose of Chassidus in general, which is to take from the crown, from the super consciousness, and to bring down powers and faculties that fill the heart with all good things. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu is. The da'at, the da'at of Moshe Rabbeinu, he's the sphere of da'at. The Zohar says, it describes the da'at as maftecha de kalin shit, as the key that contains 6 things. What are the 6 things? So the commentaries in the Zohar, they explain, this is in the Sifra de Tzniuta, it's the earliest part of the Zohar. So there he explains that what it means is that consciousness has the ability to churn all 6 chambers of the heart. And the 6 chambers of the heart are the emotions. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod. So those 6, they're churned. The key to churn them is da'at, is consciousness. What kind of consciousness? So he says the type of consciousness begins, especially according to Shita and Chabad, but in Chassidus in general, of learning Torah, which is like the super consciousness of the person, and bringing it down into the heart and translating it so that the heart can understand, so that the mind can understand and it can give birth to new faculties in the heart. And these new faculties, these new midot, these new emotions, they're not natural. They're beyond nature. They're man-made, if you want, or they're mind-made. But these man-made emotions, they last. And especially according to the Shita of Chabad, which is that every time that I, for instance, this mashal, which is very, I don't remember it given elsewhere. I don't know enough Chassidus, other Chassidus, but from all the years that I've learned other Chassidus, I don't remember right now off the top of my head somewhere else that somebody gives this parable that Hashem is in you like the life force in you, that He is the life force. I don't remember that parable being given anywhere else. It probably is, but I just don't remember it. But this is a very big thing. The moment you realize this, at any moment you can bring yourself back to experiencing love. Because what is love? It's the same way that I love myself, that I love my life force. That's loving Hashem. It's one and the same. It's not even something separate. Okay. When a person meditates, is aware, is conscious, or as they say today, is mindful of how much he loves the very life force in him, and he wants it to continue. He wants to continue living. It doesn't want it to end. So the person should then be aware that this thing that he loves, this life force that's in him that he loves, that is Hashem Himself, that is God Himself. How do we know this? Because it says, Shu Chayei HaOlamim, He is the life of the worlds. And the person is also a small world. Elyonim v'tachtonim, whether these worlds are supernal or mundane. V'zehu v'chol nafshechem, shekama kochot yesh ba'adam b'nefesh ha'chiyunit k'mo hazan v'adoche v'ama'akel. And that's what it means in Kriyas Shema when we say v'ahavta Hashem v'chol avcha v'chol nafshecha. So there's also v'chol nafshechem v'chol levavchem v'chol nafshechem. V'chol me'odecha is the other one. When it says in the singular. When it's in the plural, it doesn't have the me'odechem. In any case, v'chol nafshechem, what does it mean with all your life force? With all the different parts of the anima inside the body. For instance, there's the koach hazan, there's the power of digestion, v'adochen, what sends out excrement, and hameakel, and the one that breaks down the food, that digests. Hazan is more like the.
How's that nafshechem? Nafshechem wouldn't that be just the two, the animal soul and the godly soul?
No. It's all the powers of the soul. Before Kabbalah began speaking of two souls instead of two what they call inclinations, Yetzel Tov, Yetzel Ra. So the early language was Yetzel, an inclination or some. I guess I don't know how to say it otherwise. That's the word that's usually used. And then in Kabbalah suddenly the Arizal began to what?
Advocate.
So, and in Kabbalah, the Arizal began to use the language of nefesh. Even though this language appears in the Torah also. But he began to use nefesh more than yetzel. And then in Chassidus it became nefesh. But so that's the usual progression. But the Rambam already 500 years earlier than the Arizal, so he writes his introduction to Pirkei Avot, which is called the 8 chapters. So there he talks about the different powers in the nefesh. And the same thing in Ichod Deot, he also talks about the different powers in the nefesh. So nefesh is not necessarily what we call as the animal soul and divine soul, where we usually are referring to a certain stance that the psyche has, whether it's facing God or facing the world, that being the divine soul and the animal soul. Nefesh literally means any kind of life force in the body. So
but all the life forces that you described are attributed to the behemoth.
No, they're even not related to the behemoth. This is a big discussion. Does the body have life forces or nefashot that are more basic and more neutral also than the animal soul and the divine soul? So usually we call it nefesh chiyunit. Nefesh chiyunit means the life-giving soul. Chiyunit means that it's giving life. And in that sense, that's neutral in many ways. That it's not necessarily related to the divine, not necessarily related to...
It can be used for both.
Okay. Both the divine and the animal can enclose themselves within this nefesh and give life to the body, give the higher forms of life. But usually when we talk about the animal soul and the divine soul, we're talking at least about the emotions, more so about the mindset, how they see things, how the person sees things.
So when it talks about here about these various, breaks down the nefesh into the essentially bodily functions.
Basically, he's
talking about
the
neutral
Rambam.
ones. He's talking about the neutral ones.
Yeah, these are usually considered to be neutral.
Okay.
It's very interesting that whenever he brings this, that you feel the life force, he doesn't usually speak about love or that I think. Okay? When Descartes came along, so he basically said, same thing. How do I know that I exist? Because I think. Well, certainly thinking is one of the powers of the psyche. But a lot of people don't feel that that's the thing that they experience all the time. What they experience is hunger, cold, warmth, things like that. Descartes was very philosophical, so he kept thinking about it in terms of something very high, one of the higher functions of the soul. But really, for most people, I exist because I eat, because I have more basic bodily functions. Over the last few weeks, since our friend Yuda was here, so I've been thinking a lot about the role, not the role, but rather the relationship that we have with all the microbes in our gut. And it was very by Hashgacha. I saw an article yesterday that there's now evidence that the autism spectrum disorder, which they don't call it autism, it's ASD now, because it's a spectrum, because there's all kinds of levels of it. So that it's caused by the intestinal flora. That's an amazing thing. Because he's been claiming for a long time that most of the
autoimmune,
certainly the autoimmune, but even what we call aging diseases are related to the microbial flora in the intestine. And it's interesting that every time that the Alter Rebbe says something about the basic life force, he talks about that. And so it raises a question, like if you're talking about just the basic life force in the person as being the digestion or so on and so forth, there's something missing from the equation. And the thing that for me is missing from the equation is, where's the struggle? Even at the very basic levels, there needs to be some kind of struggle, and struggle that leads to some kind of integration, not just necessarily struggle that there's one side that wins and one side that loses, not a zero sum, but rather it becomes how do you integrate when you struggle? Really, the whole point in Chassidus or in Kabbalah is to understand that struggle is in order to integrate the opponent. That the opponent wants you to integrate him in some way. There's something beneficial for you in that struggle. There's something you need to take from it. So, if Yuda's picture is right, and it seems to be getting more and more approbation from different serious studies, then basically the same thing that we undergo in our struggle with our animal soul is what we're undergoing constantly with our flora, with the intestinal flora. It's like you have to learn how to work with it properly. And there's so many signs that it's not working properly. And if you don't integrate it properly, so the result is a whole series of incredible diseases.
There's thousands of markers. Nobody's ever bothered to look at it.
Right. Again, I am constantly guided by this because I had a very good doctor when I was 25, and he told me this. He was mamash a tzaddik, this doctor, and he certainly had some kind of insight, and he read a lot. He was really dedicated to his profession, and he used to tell me that the biggest problem with doctors is that they don't read, that they stop reading at some point, and he says you have to read at least 2 hours a day. If you don't read 2 hours a day, it's like you might as well be going backwards and become a paramedic or something like that. So he told me that the future of medicine is going to be with probiotics. He said it's a mess in there, and nobody knows how to make sense of it yet. But when we do figure out how this all works, then medicines won't be so much the type of pharmacological stuff that you see today. It'll be
how to normalize
the flora. And so there's a lot of very interesting medicine going in that direction. We have to go. Okay.
No, you have to go.
I have to go down.
You have an aliyah. Yeah. Literally, you have an aliyah.
Okay.
Are you crying?
No. My daughter has a bat mitzvah today.
Today.
Oh, Mazal Tov. I saw fun just